The contract of convenience's city was a furnace of ambition, steel and glass, scraping the clouds like declarations of war. From the top floor of the Monroe Tower, David Monroe stood at his office window, watching Manhattan pulse below him like a living thing. Rain streaked down the glass, softening the world outside. Nothing ever softened him. He checked his watch. 5 minutes late, David never tolerated lateness. Not from his employees, not from his competitors. Certainly not from the woman who had just agreed under binding legal contract to become his wife. He turned away from the skyline and walked to the long marble table where the prenup sat, flanked by 2 pens. His lawyer, Arden Slade, leaned against a bookshelf, impeccably dressed. Expression unreadable. "She'll come," Arden said. "She needs this." "Need and desperation aren't the same," David replied, adjusting the cuff of his shirt. "If she's desperate, she'll be a liability."
Ow.
"I don't need liabilities." The door opened quietly. She didn't look like someone about to marry a billionaire. No designer heels, no dramatic entrance. Just a woman in a dark olive coat, rain still fresh in her windswept hair, a leather portfolio clutched under one arm. Eyes the color of faded sea glass met his with calm certainty. She didn't smile. "Leona Vale," she said, extending her hand. He didn't shake it. He simply nodded, motioning to the chair across from him. She sat, opened her portfolio. Through a single sheet, a signed version of the contract dated, stamped, and notarized. "You're prepared," David said. "You're paying me to be." She replied. David examined her face for any sign of nerves. There were none. Just poise. And that quiet, elusive confidence that his gut told him was more dangerous than it appeared. Arden slid the prenup across the table. "This is the final version. Clauses include—" "I've read it," Leona said, not looking at Arden. "Don't need a recap." David watched her sign, her movements clean and deliberate. Then he took the pen and signed beside her name. "We'll hold a private ceremony," David said, rising. "No press, no spectacle. You'll move into the penthouse next week. You'll attend scheduled appearances when instructed. You'll say nothing personal to the media." He tapped the document, ends in 8 months. Cleanly. "During those 8 months," Leona asked, folding her hands, "you play the part? You smile when expected, and you don't ask questions." She rose too, shouldering her bag. "Understood."
But just so we're clear, I'm not afraid of you, Mr. Monroe, so if you expect obedience, marry someone else.
Her voice didn't rise. She didn't flinch, and that tautly made David's pulse quicken. "I don't want obedience," he said, stepping closer. "Want results." "Then we're in agreement," she said. They shook hands at last. Her fingers were cool, steady, and for the first time in a long time, David felt something unfamiliar. Curiosity. The wedding took place on a Tuesday. Morning in a glass chapel overlooking the East River. No guests, no vows. Just a notary, Arden. And a flash of camera shutters for documentation. Leona wore a slate-gray dress, simple. Elegant, unbothered by tradition. David wore the same tailored suit he used for board meetings. When the notary said, "You may kiss the bride," neither moved. "Not necessary," David said flatly. "Thank God," Leona muttered under her breath. They signed the marriage certificate. Arden filed the documents. By noon, they were husband and wife. By 12:05, they were in the back seat of David's private car, striving toward the Monroe penthouse. Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was tactical. David checked his phone. Billionaires were already swirling. Billionaire. David Monroe marries mystery woman in secret ceremony. Who is Leona Vale? "The wife behind the Monroe empire. You're trending," he said dryly. "Don't blame me," Leona replied, looking out the window. "You built an empire? People like watching empires burn." The penthouse was a fortress in the sky, floor-to-ceiling windows, black marble floors, chrome fixtures. A view that stretched all the way to the edge of Queens. Leona took it in. Without comment, "You'll stay in the guest suite," David said. "I don't bring my work into the bedroom. This marriage is work." "Same here," she replied. "Not here to fall in love with you," good David said. Something in her voice stuck with him. The way she said it, not cold, not bitter, just final, He watched her walk through the space, pausing by the bookshelves, the fireplace, the minimalist art that cost more than most homes. "It's very you," she said. "And what does that mean? Controlled, curated, impersonal. Jew, you have a problem with that?" Leona turned, met his gaze. "No, I'm just surprised." "By what?" "Ow." "That someone who built all this still looks like he's trying to escape it." David had no reply. That night, rain returned. Leona stood on the balcony, hair pulled into a loose bun, David's oversized robe wrapped around her frame. She held a mug of tea she made herself, refusing staff help. She watched the skyline, not as an outsider, but like someone memorizing a secret. David joined her, 2 fingers of bourbon in hand. The rain didn't touch them under the glass canopy, but the sound filled the air between them. "How much debt are you in?" he asked. She blinked. "Bold. It's why you agreed to this." "True."
Oh.
She took a sip. 130,000. Student loans. And medical bills. "My mom was sick. I left school to take care of her. Didn't have insurance. She passed 2 years ago." David said nothing. "You don't have to say anything dramatic," Leona added with a half smile. "I'm not here for sympathy, just the paycheck. And after the contract ends, I move somewhere quiet. Open my own studio. Live small." "Why small?" "Because small is manageable. Small doesn't get ripped away." David stared into the glass. The city reflected back at him. Big gets remembered. Big also gets targeted. They stood in silence. Then she asked, "Why didn't you just marry someone from your world? A socialite, an heiress? Because women in my world come with alliances, expectations, knives behind their backs. And you think I don't? I think you're dangerous in a different way." She looked at him. "You think I'm dangerous? Think you're not afraid of me, and that makes you unpredictable?" She smiled faintly. "We'll get used to it." He didn't sleep that night. He sat in his office, going over financial statements, and found his focus fraying. Her voice, her presence, lingered like static in his mind. Why her? Why did she feel real in a world that had grown so fabricated? Dawn broke. He glanced at the guest suite's closed door. Part of him wanted to knock, just to see what she'd say. But he didn't, because this was just a contract, and contracts didn't come with feelings, at least. They weren't supposed. 2. The illusion of distance had a months passed like a slow-burning fuse. On paper, David and Leona were the perfect couple. Magazines hailed them as the Monroe mystery, a sudden, stunning marriage between the city's most elusive billionaire and an unknown woman whose past was virtually blank. The public didn't need facts. It needed fantasy. And Leona played her part well. She appeared by David's side at galas and fundraisers. Always elegant in minimalist dresses, her hair swept into effortless styles. Never too flashy, never too revealing. Always just distant. Enough to stir intrigue. David had expected her to break character by now, to slip, to demand, to scheme. But Leona didn't want access to his fortune. She didn't even ask about it. She spent her mornings in the sunlit corner of the penthouse, sketching quietly in a thick-bound journal. Afternoons, she volunteered at a small art nonprofit in Brooklyn. Evenings, she disappeared into books. She never flirted, never pried, never asked questions, and that somehow made her impossible to ignore. "You're obsessed," said Arden, one night over drinks at the Marble Bar in David's private club. "I'm not," David replied, sipping his whiskey. "You watched her for 10 minutes straight at the Langford Gala. Don't insult me by pretending otherwise. She's good at what she does. That's all. You're not a man who keeps people around unless they serve a purpose. So tell me, what's her purpose now?" David didn't answer. The illusion started to crack one. Right, in mid-November. David returned from a flight to Los Angeles. Exhausted and irritable. The penthouse was quiet, lights dimmed, but the faint sound of piano music drifted from the library. He followed it inside. Leona sat at the baby grand, barefoot, hair undone, eyes half closed as her fingers moved effortlessly. Across the keys, a melody slow and aching, something she was making up as she went. He stood in the doorway, watching her, not saying a word. When she finished, she looked up and smiled, soft and tired. "Couldn't sleep? Flight delay," he said. "How?" Was the West Coast? Plastic? Sounds about right, the beat passed. Then impulsively, David asked, "Why music?" She closed the lid of the piano gently. "My father taught me. He used to say that when you don't know what to say, you play. Smart man." "Flawed," she replied, "but good at pretending he wasn't." David stepped inside. "What happened to him?" "He left. One morning, never came back. We found out later he died in a car crash, 2 states away." The words were simple. "It's too simple." "I'm sorry," David said. "Don't be. I was 13. I stopped waiting after the second day." He didn't know what to say to that. So he didn't, but she smiled again. "You don't have to stand so far away, you know." He walked closer, and that night, for the first time since they married, they sat beside each other and talked, not about business or events or schedules, but about music, books, architecture, grief. When the clock struck 2, she stood and stretched. "You should sleep," she said. "You too," he replied. But as she turned to go, he caught her hand not tightly, not possessively, just held it. She didn't pull away, but she didn't say anything either. The next morning, the headline hit, "Fake Wife." Leona Vale's real identity exposed within hours. David's phone exploded with alerts. Celine Vero, his former lover, now a rival mogul, had fed the press a carefully twisted version of Leona's history, that she'd lied about her education, forged a resume, and manipulated her way into David's life. It was fiction, crafted with just enough truth to sting. When David arrived at the penthouse, the air was tense. Leona stood in front of the fireplace, phone in hand. Scrolling through comments that blurred into venom, "They say I seduced you," she said quietly. "That I faked my degree. That I sold my soul for a penthouse view." "I'll handle it," David replied. "Will you?" He met her eyes. They weren't angry. They were tired. "You know it's a lie," he said. "You think that's enough?" Pause. The fireplace crackled behind her. "Tell me something, David," she said softly. "If I walk out that door now, would you stop me?" He stared at her, then stepped forward, but she was already turning away. The boardroom was a storm. David stood at the head of the table, surrounded by men and women in suits, their faces split between outrage and speculation. "This marriage was a fraud," one of them said. "You've jeopardized investor confidence." "Leona Vale has no corporate title, no shares. What she is to me or isn't doesn't concern this board," David snapped. "If the public believes you've lied, our value drops. Then, let them believe something else," he said. "What exactly are you suggesting?" He picked up the remote, flicked on the presentation screen. An image of Leona appeared, not in glamour, but at the Brooklyn nonprofit, surrounded by children, laughing with paint on her hands. "This woman rebuilt one of our failing properties without being asked," David said. "She's quietly rebranded our lowest performing resort into a top-reviewed destination. And she's done it with no staff, no budget, no credit." He paused. The room was still. "You want headlines? Give them truth. Leona Vale is the heart of this company's next chapter, and she's staying." Leona wasn't there when he returned home, but her portfolio was. He opened it page by page, staring at designs he didn't know she'd made. Sketches of future resorts, blueprints, renderings, a full project proposal dated weeks ago. She was never playing a part. She was building something real. He sat on the edge of her bed, and for the first time in 7 years, David Monroe felt something dangerous, regret. A week passed before he found her again. In Vermont, of all places, working quietly at the mountain retreat she'd redesigned. Snow fell softly outside. The lodge buzzed with holiday music and guests sipping hot cider, and there she was in jeans and a red flannel shirt, paint on her knuckles, directing a team of workers with calm precision. He didn't approach immediately. He just watched, finally. When the room cleared, he walked to her. She turned, startled, and he said the words he hadn't said in years. "I'm sorry." "For what?" she asked. "For letting you think I didn't care?" Her expression softened. "You're not great at showing it."
"No," he admitted.
"But I'm learning." A silence passed. Then, without ceremony, he held out her portfolio. "Left this, I thought I wouldn't need it anymore." "You do?" he said. Because you're not going anywhere. Outside, snow blanketed the mountains. Inside, by the fire, two people sat side by side. No longer strangers, no longer. Pretending, and slowly, quietly, the illusion of distance began to melt. Love, or something like snow, was still falling when Leona Vale agreed to return. Not with conditions, not with bitterness. Just a quiet nod, a returned gaze, the slow exhale that sounded like the thawing of something long frozen. David didn't ask her to explain where she'd been in those days she was gone. He didn't need to. The truth was written in the worn look behind her eyes and the way she hesitated before stepping back into the penthouse. Like it was no longer just a set, but a place that had once let her down. Yet this time, he noticed. The difference, when she unpacked, she didn't put everything back in the guest suite. Her sketches returned to the sunroom. Her mug sat in the kitchen again. And at night, the piano played. Not sad songs. Not yet love songs, but something in between. The media, as expected, spun faster than ever. Monroe couple survived scandal. Leona Vale's design genius revealed. Are David and Leona the real deal? Public favor turned again? Not. Because of some grand statement from David, but because Leona spoke. At last, not to tabloids, not to red carpets, but during a quiet interview with a design podcast. She didn't name drop, didn't claim power. She talked about community spaces, healing through design, rebuilding what people throw away when it went live. The clip hit over 2 million plays in 24 hours, not because of the story, but because of the way she told it, sincere, unrehearsed, completely different from the world. David had lived in for years. She kissed him first. On a night when the rain returned, tapping lightly against the windows of the study, he was reading a quarterly report. She walked in, barefoot, still wearing paint-smudged jeans. She didn't say anything, just crossed the room and pressed her lips. To his, like it was the most natural thing in the world. It wasn't a performance. It was an obligation. It was permission. When she pulled back, David stared at her. Was that ... part of the contract? He asked, voice low. No, she whispered. It's what broke it. But peace never lasted long in his world. At the next board meeting, a storm brewed. Celine Vero had managed to plant an anonymous complaint, suggesting that Leona's influence in Monroe developments was nepotism, unethical, undocumented, and a breach of shareholder interests. The room split in two. Some members remained loyal to David. Others wanted blood. This marriage, Celine said, standing in the gallery like a queen addressing her court, was never about love. It was leverage, smoke, and mirrors. David stood, voice calm. You're right, he said. The room quieted. It was a contract, designed to secure a vote, protect a legacy. But it became more than that. Not because we planned it. Because we didn't. He clicked the remote. Images filled the screen, not of dates or dinners, but of Leona's work. Restoration blueprints, improved revenue metrics, testimonials from team members. This woman you doubt? David said, voice rising just enough. She saved our Vermont lodge, redesigned the Aspen property, tripled our traffic in 2 quarters. She's more than my wife. He turned toward the screen again. She's the reason we're still relevant. After the meeting, Leona stood in the hallway. Arms crossed. You didn't have to defend me, she said. Yes, David replied. I did. A beat passed. You called me your wife? She said, voice softer. You are. The next. Few weeks blurred. They traveled together Miami for the next site, Florence for the European expansion. They didn't pose, didn't perform, didn't pretend. One night in Italy, she wore a midnight blue dress, hair falling loosely down her back. He watched her laugh over a glass of wine, and for a moment, he forgot everything else. Do you remember? The first thing I said to you? She asked. He nodded. I'm not afraid of you. I meant it. I know, he said, smiling. That's why I noticed you. Back in Manhattan, as winter melted into spring, the world kept moving, but something changed. David's penthouse no longer felt like a fortress. Books sat on side tables. Candles burned without occasion. Music played from hidden speakers. He caught himself reaching for her hand during meetings. She left notes in his briefcase. They no longer slept apart. They no longer avoided using words like us or ours. Still, the contract loomed. The deadline, the official expiration. One night she stood in the kitchen, flipping through the document they once signed in silence. "It ends in 3 weeks," she said. "So it does. What do you want to do?" David stepped forward. "I want to rip it up." She handed it to him. He tore it in half, then in quarters, then let it burn slowly in the fireplace. The final chapter came with little fanfare, just a press conference. Held in a clean white showroom filled with reporters and investors, David Monroe stood at the podium. Tie loosened slightly, hands steady. "This company was founded by my father," he began, "rebuilt by my team. But it was reimagined by one person." He gestured to the side. Leona stepped into the light, wearing a sleek charcoal suit, her hair pulled back, her eyes unwavering. "Meet our new creative director," David said. Flashes burst across the room. Reporters shouted questions, but he didn't hear any of them. Because when she turned to face him, confident, radiant, completely herself, he saw the only answer that mattered. This wasn't just a marriage of convenience. This was a partnership. A storm they had survived together. And the beginning of something neither of them planned, but both of them wanted. End.